Get ready for the best holiday sale of the year. For a limited time, enjoy 50% off annual news subscriptions at inforum.news/gift. That's right, 50% off unlimited access to local news so you can stay informed and connected to your community. It's a gift you'll want to give yourself. This incredible holiday offer ends December 22nd, so don't miss out. Subscribe now at inforum.news/gift.
Hello, and welcome to Growing Together, a gardening podcast with me, John Lamb, and a lifelong gardener and the North Dakota State University Extension horticulturist, Don Kinsler. Don, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, John?
I'm doing well. You know, here we are. It's kind of the end of the year, and in a way,
I'm happy and sad.
Happy and sad. There is. You know, I think that's a very real feeling, and something that's okay to acknowledge that there is something about this time of the year that it is. I think it's because it's the ending of a year, or, you know, it's this time to look back, and then sometimes that there are feelings of a little bit of sadness.
I'm happy because this is our first year, our first season with this podcast.
Yes, exactly.
But, you know, it's got a little sad as it kind of winds down. But the happy part is that we'll continue right after the first of the year again with a whole brand new set.
We'll be back in
But in the meantime,
January.
you know, one of my friends was telling me that he recently took a drive through an evergreen forest.
Oh, that'd be lovely.
And, except the lumberjacks were cutting down all of the evergreens, and he wondered what fir.
Oh, you had me. That's a great one. Nothing like a little evergreen humor there.
Yeah.
Well, you know, speaking of evergreens in the end of the year, what we wanted to do today is we wanted to talk about kind of the year that was a little bit, kind of a recap, going over some things throughout the year.
It is fun to kind of look back, because the value in that is none of these growing seasons are just a single slice of life. They all build on each other. And so what happens this next growing season depends on what happened this year. And, you know, as weatherman John Wheeler, who has been on this podcast
close personal friend of the show,
as he often says, we have a very short weather memory. And I know I do, because sometimes I get caught up in whatever the gardening weather is doing right now, and sometimes I don't always remember what it was maybe like. And so it's kind of fun in a podcast like this just to kind of record a little bit what this growing season was like before I forget.
And, you know, and that's like one of the things is that, you know, going back and thinking about it, it really seemed like it was a very unique growing season, and maybe in the long scope, the long play of things, maybe it really wasn't totally unique. Maybe that's the things that happen.
Well, you know, it's funny, John. For many years, I kind of kept hoping, gosh, I hope this growing season is going to be a normal one.
Right.
You know, and so I had that feeling for many, many years. And then all of a sudden it occurred to me, Don, none of these years have been the same. None of them have been normal. They've all been unique. And so you kind of just learn to roll with the conditions that there are. And this past season was kind of like that. You needed to kind of roll with it. Now, you know, there have probably been some growing seasons, some gardening years that have been a little more friendly, I suppose, than others. But it's interesting. I don't recall any of them in which I've been gardening that the seasons have been alike. And this was a really interesting growing season. And, of course, the season really started a year ago in the fall.
Fall of 2022.
Fall of 2022, because, of course, that summer was very dry and the fall was dry. And our lawn was brown, crisp, and dormant. And I hoped that we would get rain that would bring it out of dormancy and make that lawn healthy again. So when that didn't happen, and when our lawn went into last winter a year ago, dormant and crunchy, I was concerned what would happen. Would I have a lawn in the spring, or was it going to winter kill? Well, the snow came early, and the ground wasn't really frozen, which was kind of a little unique. because the snow came so early and deep that it really insulated the soil. And the frost never really went down into the ground that deep. So it's interesting then what happened this past spring when the snow melted. Of course, there was a great fear that we might have a flood because we had lots of snow. But it was interesting, with the soil that dry and not really frozen deeply, it was interesting how that moisture just sucked right down into that dry soil. And so our lawn came back just fine in the spring. It grew. It didn't winter kill. But now the interesting thing is, if that same scenario had happened, dry fall, brown, crunchy, dormant grass going into winter. If we had had a winter with no snow, an open winter, cold winter, maybe our lawn would have died out.
Yeah.
If it had gone in very stressed
if it
and
had been
then
exposed.
had been exposed to the wind blowing, no snow. So it's interesting how all these different parts kind of play together. And so it's interesting how in the spring of the year then, when everything melted, we didn't have flood, the moisture went down in, and so things worked out well. But, of course, not totally well, because when that snow melted, that deep snow, many of us had vole damage on our lawns. Did you have on yours?
I haven't found vole damage, no. And I think I would know. It's one of those things.
Yeah, it's one of those things.
From what
when
I understand,
you know
I've
it. Had vole
you know
damage.
it when you've got it. Yeah,
exactly. So anyway, when the deep snow disappeared, our lawn and many others had all these channels, these surface channels on the grass, where the voles go along. They eat the grass plants at about ground level, and you've got all this fluff and little parts along the tunnels you see where they've nested, and it just kind of makes a mess. Yeah. Well, in most cases, the grass grows out of it. So we did see more vole damage because they could hide under that snow. It gave them good protection from predators, and they had a good warm spot. It was interesting. I think when we were doing podcast, I think in early spring, late winter, early spring, I think I mentioned how when I was snow blowing alongside driveway for the first time ever, as I cleared a little spot along the edge, I overlap a little bit onto the grass, so it makes it a little easier driving. The driveway is not quite so narrow then. Okay, so when I snow blowed 6 inches onto the grass, in a couple of spots I revealed big fat voles. And a vole is a tailless field mouse, kind of brownish gray in color. And so I revealed these, and of course they met their maker fairly quickly because I didn't want them scurrying away, and so I did catch them. But that was the first time ever that I had, in snowblowing, revealed, and I thought, boy, if I revealed them in that little area, they were probably working, and they were. Okay, so lots of vole damage. Also, as the snow disappeared, there was a lot of snow mold. And that's another thing that when you've got it, you know it, you see it. When the snow disappeared, many areas had a grayish webbing. Sometimes it's almost a pinkish gray webbing on the grass surface.
Yeah, it looks almost like that there had been spiders there or something like that.
And
kind of cottony, very light.
Exactly. Yeah. Cottony, that's a good description for it. And it's a fungus. And it could survive well under that snow because it wasn't real cold under that snow, and it was kind of moist. And so anyway, it thrived during wintertime. And if a person, as soon as the snow disappeared and as soon as it dried a little bit, if you just fluffed it up with a rake, it almost immediately disappears. If it stayed on too long, that fungus can actually thin out or kill grass patches. But in most cases, I think everybody's lawns recovered okay. But it was a good example of how when conditions are just so, we can have increased snow mold.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I remember about this spring is that I'm sure if we go back and we listen to those old shows, I bet every week I'm saying it's just around the corner. It's just, we're going to be, spring's just around the corner. We're going to be ready to go. And
it took a lot of corners.
It took a lot of corners
to get around before it finally came.
It seemed like a longer, spring was short, and it came late, it seems like,
yes.
right?
And of course, another thing, because the snow stayed so long and the snow piled up higher and higher, the rabbits had easy access to apple trees.
Yep.
And so there was a lot of damage. And of course, many of us protect our apple trees up to a certain height, I don't know, 3 feet, maybe 4 feet at most. But when the snowbanks are 5 feet and the rabbits can just get right over whatever protection you gave, and when they're nibbling then on the upper kind of main branches where they intersect with the trunk, then the rabbits caused great damage.
Yeah.
And so there were some trees that couldn't recover, so the damage wasn't always lower. It was up on some of the main trunks, main branches. So severe rabbit injury. And, they had easy access. But the other thing, too, they had a long winter, and they need to energize themselves with green tissue, and they find that green tissue right under the bark of many of our trees and shrubs. So it was a severe rabbit injury year.
I remember that was another. We talked about that quite a bit too. Is that the damage that was done there and what can be done? Both can some of this be saved, or what do we do different next year? And
to
I
know when to let go,
Yep.
or when there's something we could do about it.
And I remember on my end, we had a burning bush in front that you said is like candy for
rabbit candy.
Yes, and
we searched the neighborhoods for those,
and they got to it very early last fall.
They had to get
early
to it
last,
before it got
last
covered
winter.
with snow.
Right. But then, so I did put a cage up, and so we did lose some branches on that. But with the cage, it did come back, and it came back really pretty well. So we put the cage up earlier this year, and so hopefully that'll be it. But yeah, that's one of the things that we can do going forward.
Isn't it funny? You do like that. You do learn which of your landscape plants the rabbits are going to go for, don't you?
Well, we'll only see
they
now.
Don't just go random. They're a little bit more discriminating in their taste. So they don't just eat whatever's available. It seems they kind of go for things. In our case, it's, the apple trees if we don't protect them, but roses. They love rose bushes. And so
which you think would be odd because they would be
thorny.
Yeah, exactly.
But they nibble the thorns as though they were frosting on the.
They have those hardy teeth. What else struck you about this spring?
Well, the thing that struck me is it went from. Well, I was going to say, what spring? It went from, winter. We had a little opening, I suppose, and then just the heat struck.
Do you feel that in this area, it does seem that when we look at our seasons, we love summer the most, but winter seems like it's maybe the longest. And it seems like those two bookend seasons there, fall and spring, really can be the shortest. And this spring did seem like it was here and gone, right?
Yeah, it really did. Because I really love spring. And because that's kind of when things are waking up, and it is so fun to walk around the yard and garden and just kind of see the things popping up and leafing out. And so it is fun. And so I'm happy about this last year and the things that we'll talk about a little more. I'm happy about how it all turned out, but I was disappointed at how quickly it turned from spring, a little bit of spring, into summer because it got warm really quick. And some of the spring flowering things, late spring, early summer flowering things like the peonies didn't last very long because they're used to blooming when it's kind of moderate, late May, early June. We have nice temperatures usually, and they aren't used to these hot blasts.
Yeah.
That it quickly turned to.
Well, we'll talk about summer, but in a minute. Right now, let's just take a quick little break.
If you're loving this podcast, be sure to check out our full lineup. From news and local politics to sports and true crime, find your next great listen right now at inforum.com/podcasts. That's inforum.com/podcasts.
All right, we're back and we're talking about the year in review, the year in our gardens, plural, in review. And let's talk about the summer because, like we said, it just kind of came. I mean, ultimately, when you look at the calendar, it probably came when it was supposed to come, but it was really pretty warm, pretty fast, wasn't it?
It was, and I love our garden. it's not easy to get me irritated, but I will admit in June I did get irritated because a few years ago we had bought some really nice iris varieties, with good, deep, rich colors, good velvety purple and some sunny yellow types. And this was the first year that they had been in place long enough to produce good bloom, and I was really excited. And so the buds formed, the buds started to open, and then June arrived with just heat.
Yeah.
And those poor iris blossoms, as they opened, they just got blasted. Some of them, I don't know if they lasted maybe 15 minutes or 30 minutes before they just totally withered. And so, well, I'm looking forward to next year, maybe next year. The optimism of a gardener. Hopefully next year I'll be able to enjoy those. So June to me was a disappointment on some of the June blooms of perennials and things.
They were kind of missing in a way.
Yeah,
they were certainly downplayed.
Yeah, they just didn't last very long. And but on the upside, where June turned hot, then some of our gardening things that like it hot had a chance to get good warm soil and off to a good start. And so tomatoes
were, that was a good year for tomatoes.
And melons. Melons took off right away, and peppers and eggplants and things like that started off really, really well. And so, it's interesting how some things in gardening, some things maybe don't do so good, but then other things compensate and kind of take up the slack from there. But along with the heat then, it seems the rain in the middle of summer disappeared.
Yeah.
It just wasn't there.
We didn't get really much
so
of it.
Once
I think
again,
June in particular seemed like very, very dry.
Yes.
Yeah.
And pretty soon, the end of June, our lawn went brown and dormant once again.
Yep.
And it had me wondering if I should have planted something different, a different type of grass rather than Kentucky bluegrass, or maybe I should have joined the movement to less lawn or no lawn or done something, because once again, my lawn was brown and crunchy. And I don't live for our lawn, but I like the lawn to be a backdrop, a nice backdrop, against which the rest of our landscape is featured.
Yep.
And of course, I want that backdrop of lawn to not be brown and crunchy.
Yes.
And I don't water our lawn. I don't put extra input.
You've got quite a big
lawn,
we should say.
Yeah, and so
that would be quite an endeavor.
So again, then it went brown and crunchy. Well, I thought, okay, because I remember when we were doing our podcasts out at each of our yards in the middle of summer. There, I apologized because our lawn just wasn't very nice. So anyway, that was a little bit disappointing, but our lawns can go dormant. Our Kentucky bluegrass, that's one of the advantages of it. It can go dormant without dying. It just hunkers down and waits for conditions to get nice again. So I wasn't overly sad. I use our water for our flowers and our vegetables. Our annual flowers did beautifully.
Yep.
Most of them like the heat. The zinnias and petunias, marigolds, and everything shaped up really, really nice. I was able to keep the weeds under control. One advantage of not a lot of rain is, if you can get the water where it needs to be on the flowers and vegetables and not on the extra soil, well, then the weeds don't germinate as much either. So in some ways, my weed pressure was a little less on some things because there wasn't even enough rain to get the weeds to sprout. And so, well, I had a little break from some of the weeding that I needed to do. And but it's interesting too. On average, when the summer kind of started to wind down a little bit and going into fall, I believe our friend John Wheeler indicated that moisture was about average.
Yeah.
But it came in two events.
Yeah.
Lots of rain in two events.
Big dumps of rain.
With lots of drought in between.
Yes.
And, that's that's not the 1 inch per week.
No.
That, we always talk about as gardeners, boy, if we could get 1 inch of rain per week or every 10 days, we wouldn't have to water. And boy, that's the ideal. But this wasn't that ideal this year. So, but it's kind of chuckle. I suppose someday a person will look back and say, oh, well, that looks like an average moisture year. But
yeah, exactly. If you were to look at the number, yes. But if you were to look at the actual
the reality
calendar
of what it
and
did
when
to our
you
yards
would
and
see a lot
gardens.
of days in between where it was very, very dry.
Right. And so we saw an increase also in blossom end rot of tomatoes. Now, blossom end rot is when that bottom of the tomato gets all sunken black, leathery, brownish, and it's not a disease caused by fungus or bacteria, but that's caused by fluctuating moisture. The fluctuating moisture interferes with calcium uptake, and our soils have plenty of calcium, so they don't need the Tums or the Epsom salts or anything like that. But what tomatoes want is a more uniform, consistent level of moisture in the soil, so they can take that calcium out of the soil, and that's the best way to prevent blossom end rot. But when you've got moisture as sporadic or non-existent as we had, then we tend to water in kind of batches, as they dry out. But many of us prevented that this year by mulching. Yep. Since we didn't have adequate moisture, I mulched heavily. I didn't have any blossom end rot this year. Mulch has really helped. This was the year of the mulch.
Yeah.
Whether it's dried grass clippings that haven't been treated with herbicide, or I use a lot of wood chips in our flower gardens. And so it was definitely a year in which mulch really helped conserve the moisture that you put on. Also, sometimes we think about moisture, but the mulch also keeps the soil cool.
Yep.
Because, boy, with some of the extended heat, and I don't remember how many days above 90 degrees that we had, but it was hot.
Yeah.
And when the soil gets that hot, that's not good for the roots either. Things that are adapted in our area don't like it that hot. The roots don't like it that hot. So mulch also keeps the soil cool. And the mention of extended heat like that brings to mind a problem that happened with tomatoes this year. Okay, tomatoes like it hot, okay? But there's an upper threshold which is around 89, 90 degrees. And when the temperature reaches that for extended time, even tomatoes have that upper threshold. They don't like it above that point. And above that point, the temperature interferes with growth. The tomatoes stop growing. And tomato ripening of the fruit, is a growth process. So at about 90 degrees and above, for extended time periods, it louses up the ripening of a tomato. You would think, boy, tomatoes like it warm. Extended heat should really get us some good ripe tomatoes. But at that upper threshold, it actually interfered with ripening. So for some of us, and I got a lot of questions about this, some of this one, why aren't my tomatoes ripening? Yeah. They're sitting there forever, and they're not getting nice and kind of soft or ripe, that ripeness that you kind of want, so they don't taste like a store-bought tomato.
Right.
And so anyway, that's what happened. We just had too many days that were at or above that threshold where the tomatoes weren't ripening the way they should.
Is that similar to the end of the year where you may have tomatoes that are fully formed on the vine,
yes,
but because on the flip side it's been too cool?
Exactly.
Maybe it hasn't frozen yet, but it's been too cool that it's not that great window for ripening of tomatoes.
Right. It's that growth, that optimal growth temperature isn't there.
Yeah.
And so like you say, John, it's the flip side happens oftentimes in the fall of the year.
So while we think that tomatoes like it hot, they like it hot to
even
a point.
They have
and then,
their
they
upper,
exactly. Just not too hot.
Not too hot, exactly. And so overall, in our own vegetable garden, things did pretty well. Some of the things that don't like it hot, like radishes, my radishes didn't do well because they don't like it hot. So I had lots of tops and not much good radish.
Yeah, Sam had the same. She was very excited to grow some radishes this year, and they just didn't come in really.
Yeah, exactly, because they're very temperature sensitive. They'd rather have it cool.
And they're a quick growing vegetable, aren't they?
Yeah.
So it is kind of nice that you can maybe try again.
I wished I would have tried some in the fall. Because in the fall, when things got a little cooler, that would have probably been a good time to plant some radishes.
Yeah.
In fact, I had one person that responded to our garden podcast, and he mentioned, he's gardened for years, and he said he finally quit planting radishes in the spring and summer. And of course, this year it went right from right into hot summer. And so what he said is he got tired of battling radishes that didn't have that nice cool window. And so he started planting his radishes in late summer when they would grow and ripen when it was cool.
Oh.
Well, I guess, does a radish ripen?
Well,
but
form
a decent root. And so, so some of us, I think, that's one of my goals. I want to start doing more planting of vegetables in the fall. I know you can get a wonderful crop of broccoli in the fall. I've done that in the past. I should do it again. So one of my to-do list for next year, I want to plant some of these things also in the fall. I'm going to take his advice and do radishes in the fall and broccoli. I know you can get a good crop in the fall then, too.
Good. What other vegetables did well for you this year?
Oh, gosh, the watermelon.
Yes.
The watermelon loved the heat. Oh, and we had some mouth-watering muskmelon. Oh, that were so wonderful. And so the melons did well. I had more than enough to eat. I didn't weigh some of the watermelons this year, but I mean they were an armful. Gosh, they tasted so good. And our squash, we harvested in the fall of the year. The squash, I could tell, liked the heat.
Yeah, how about some of those root vegetables that because we had such a moderate fall that we didn't have like an early frost or anything like that, or a hard frost at least. How did that work for you? Like carrots and potatoes? How were those for you?
The carrots I left in until the bitter end because we sampled some, but they didn't get enough cool temperatures because I don't remember when we had our first frost of fall, but we didn't have much frost this fall. No, it was a nice, beautiful long fall, which I loved. Our flowers stayed blooming. I think I took pictures of roses that were blooming, I think the end of October.
I saw a raspberry bush that had fruit in October. Yeah,
sure. And so I loved it. But if I was going to find a negative, it would be that our carrots didn't sweeten up.
Okay.
But I could deal with that because I love the long falls. But our carrots just didn't develop the sweetness because they didn't get the cool ground temperatures. So I left them in, and then I was digging those kind of right when the soil was about to freeze up. And
How about potatoes?
They did okay. Potatoes I dug earlier before those, but I did leave them in the ground as long as possible. Potatoes did well. I had a nice crop. Some years, if I don't hill them up well and if I don't do the right things with them, you fertilize it, etc. And sometimes I just get lots that are about egg-sized. But this year I had nice, good potatoes, so they're all safe in the root cellar. Squash, we had a bumper crop of, I like Uncle David's Dakota Dessert Squash. Wonderful long name.
Yes.
And that's from Prairie Road Organic Seed in Fullerton, North Dakota, one of our few North Dakota seed companies. And it's a buttercup type. So for people that are dyed-in-the-wool buttercup growers like I was, but I found this one is even sweeter.
Okay.
And it's a buttercup type. So they are wonderfully tucked away down in our basement and holding up really well. So I'm calling the vegetable gardening year, a success.
Yeah.
The annual flowers did beautifully. I'm calling that a success. The late flowering perennials, gosh, the mums were beautiful.
And they had a great long season.
Purple dome aster, they were beautiful in the fall. And sedum. Do you have any of the taller sedum?
We don't, but over at Concordia they've got a number, so it's nice to see.
And those bloomed so beautifully. And so all in all, I'm calling it a good growing year. Oh, the thing I especially liked was rain started coming the end of August. And the rain and favorable temperatures, our lawn greened up, and it looked nicer in September and October than it did all summer long. So it was so nice. It was beautiful.
And how late did you mow this year?
December.
Yes.
Mostly to say I could.
Yeah, and I was going to say, did you? Yeah, there probably hadn't been necessarily a lot of growing, but there were people who were routinely mowing in November.
Yeah, because you can crunch up those leaves and the final leaves that fell or blew in, you could crunch those up. And so it was fun. I think my record before had been a Thanksgiving Day. I had mowed just to say I did. And so December.
Well, we were talking about how there was spring was non-existent, and sometimes it can seem like fall was non-existent, but we did have a really great fall.
Oh yeah,
and I wonder how
beautiful. I'd like if each of the falls could be like this.
It would be great, and I wonder how like having so much moisture in the fall, how that will affect. We'll see about the early growing season next year, see how all that comes into be. Obviously, there's a number of days. I saw today they saying 100 days until opening day of baseball, which gives me already, we're not even out of.
That sounds like it's right around the corner.
Right, exactly. We're not even out of football season, but it's that 100-day mark is okay. Well, we can start counting down. But so growing season will be actually coming up.
It is, and it's going to be interesting because as we're speaking right now, there's hardly any snow on the ground.
No.
Here in Fargo, and for quite an area. I recently got an email from a listener up in northern Minnesota, and they don't have snow in that area anyway of northern Minnesota. They don't have snow. They're a little concerned about their perennials.
Yep.
And but sometimes there's not a whole lot we can do about some things.
Nature's nature.
So, nature's going to do. I'm keeping my fingers crossed a little bit because some of our perennials, of course, like that generous snow cover. It's funny. When I say generous snow cover, I'd kind of like to put my order in for maybe 6 to 10 inches of snow over the course of the winter.
Okay, I could deal with that. I can live with that.
I don't want 96 inches like we had in the 96, 97 winter.
Yeah.
I don't want that much. So it's funny. I suppose I get a little bit picky as to what I'd like. I don't want bare soil. If we get 30 below and the soil is bare, that's not going to
That's
going to penetrate into the ground. But there's not a whole lot we can do. I do have a little bit of something in reserve, though. In the fall of the year, I raked up a couple of big bags of leaves that had kind of blown against our garden fence. And so before the wind switched and they blew off in another direction, I bagged some of those up. And I did put some leaves around some of our tenderest perennials. And when I say tenderest perennials, the mums.
Yep.
Mums are definitely the most tender perennial that I grow. They can easily freeze out. And so anyway, if I've got some leaves over them now, and also I've got a peace rose, which is a hybrid tea, a little more tender, and I've got leaves around that. If we continue to not get snow, I'm going to take some of these bags of leaves and distribute some more leaves on. And then I always wet them down good so that they'll freeze.
Yep.
But, this has been interesting. We've had a number of days in the 40s.
Yeah. So
I'm kind of curious, it's not real good if the soil surface kind of freezes and thaws. That kind of heaves perennials. We used to, I guess, horticulturists need to find humor where they have it. We used to kind of joke about our perennials heaving, but I mean, it's not a laughing matter, but it's a unique term.
Well, so what are you hearing from people? You said that you've heard a couple of people about about not having much snow cover. Maybe we should post this to people now. So we'll be off the air for a couple of weeks. We won't have a new episode. But if people want to write in, maybe they can share their stories of their big successes this year. That would be nice, wouldn't it?
Oh, definitely. Because all of those, the experiences that we share and that I hear from others, I store those up in my little head because then I can always relate. Well, somebody related that such and such happened. They had good luck or they didn't have good luck. So all of those experiences that we all share form a nice bank of knowledge. So yes, anything, let's get my email address. So anything that you have to share on anything, successes, failures, kind of something that unique happened, I always kind of file those away or maybe write about them. For example, I just got an email from someone wondering, should they water their fruit trees? Because there's no snow. They didn't get a whole lot of rain this fall. Wondering if they should. But, some of those things are kind of uncharted territory. I don't know if, watering now, there's some frost in the soil. I don't know if that would just cause more harm. Watering, would that kind of temporarily thaw out the root system. I tend to think probably not watering. But anyway, that's the type of question that is interesting in a unique year.
Well, and I think, we've that while this does seem like an odd year for a lack of snow on the ground now, and maybe but the years like this have happened before, and things like fruit trees have been around for years.
Before.
They've fruit trees. A fruit tree's lifespan is more than 10 years, and so let's say if this happens on average every 10 years, they have. They may be slower next year or something like that, but I would think you
That's
run
one thing that always impresses me. It's all happened before. Because to your point, John, my parents were married in 1943, and December 18th. Okay, the week before Christmas, 1943.
My mom's birthday.
And their photos show no snow on the ground.
Oh.
I don't know what happened between the 18th and Christmas.
Yep.
But, no snow on the ground. So, it's all happened before. Things grow. Things have survived. Not everything winter kills. We aren't going to have a barren landscape come next spring. But, it's interesting. To his point, I think I'd probably not water at this point. But anyway, if you have anything at all, send me an email. Donald.Kinzler, spelled Kinzler, at ndsu.edu. And I really enjoy hearing from everybody.
And send along pictures if you can. We'll try to get those up on Instagram. Oh, they're really nice. They're really nice. And and exactly, like people sharing what their experiences, that is how we learn. That is how we are inspired. So, and it also gives us great ideas for things to talk about in the future.
When talk about inspiration, when I get emails or see what other people, and I like Facebook. I like gardeners on Facebook.
Yeah.
When they post pictures of something that's doing really, really well, then sometimes I think, I want one of those.
Yeah, I want to try that.
I want to try that, yeah. And so it's awesome. And so, as I always say, we're all in this together.
Yep.
And we're all learning together on this. And that's what makes this podcast so fun.
Yeah.
We're sitting at a table right now. This morning we happen to be sitting at this round table. There's 3 chairs. John's in one, I'm at the other, and you, listener, you're in the other chair right here between us.
Yeah, that's a great way to think about that. And I'm looking forward to next year because we've already got a couple of good shows lined up. We've got a lot of interesting topics, things that we want to go over. We want to talk about the things that we're excited to grow next year.
Yes, and I am excited because the new All-America selections have been revealed, so it's going to be fun to talk about those. And it's always fun to talk about what's new and upcoming because it's fun to try new things as well as the old.
And also the seed catalogs are coming out.
Oh, boy, yeah. I got my first one already.
Nice.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I'm excited.
We will talk about those in early January. Well, Don, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you John.
Thank you for a great year. This has been a lot of fun doing this.
This has been awesome.
And so we will talk to you, listeners, in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, Merry Christmas to everyone and have a great new year.